Hi, this is Jeff Curto, and welcome to episode number 115 of Camera Position, the podcast about the creative side of photography. Personal assignments. Personal assignments, it's kind of funny. I've been teaching photography since 1984, a long time, and I've given a lot of photography assignments. I've given a lot of assignments to students who, for better or for worse, need some sort of jog, some sort of poke or prod to get them moving or thinking or acting photographically. They need some method of helping them figure out what it is that they're interested in photographing, or perhaps not so much what they're interested in photographing, but to give them some impetus to go out and explore the world. And I hate to say that I don't do it as often as I should. Give myself an assignment, give myself a prod or a push to do something new or different. And I thought I'd report here about an assignment I gave myself this summer that I thought turned out pretty successfully. And that was to see what I could photograph along a 150 feet or so stretch of shoreline of Lake Superior. This is a section of shoreline that I know pretty well, and have never really spent any time photographing it. I know it well by looking at it, but I don't really know it well by photographing it. So I went out, and for the course of several weeks, really just more like a couple of weeks, I made photographs in this section. I made some rules for myself, and I think what I want to talk about here in this episode of Camera Position is that idea of making rules, because by making rules, I constrained myself in a certain way, forced myself to do certain things that I wouldn't otherwise probably have done. So here were my rules. My rules were that I could not make any photographs from vantage points that were beyond the 150 feet that I had staked out as the area that I was going to photograph. And then I also made a couple more rules, and that was that I could not photograph more than 10 feet from the place where the water meets the land. So it was important that I kind of stuck to those rules. I could photograph things that were more than 10 feet away, but I wasn't going to let myself stand more than 10 feet away, because I wanted to kind of constrain myself to this one narrow strip, 150 feet long by about 20 feet wide, 20 feet out into the water and 20 feet up onto the shoreline. And what I discovered was that this idea of forcing myself, constraining myself, sort of managing myself in some way, forced me to look. It really forced me to look at the area around me and to see the potential of photographs that were there and to see what kinds of things that I could photograph. Now, there were a couple of other things that happened that I thought were really interesting too. One was that while I would sometimes discover photographs that might exist outside of my boundaries that I set up, I also discovered that there were times when it was really helpful for me to return to that area again in a different light, at a different time of day, a different type of day perhaps, and see what it was that I could see, even though perhaps I'd looked in that particular spot and not found it again, not found something there. So returning to those places was really important, and I think if you're going to set yourself a personal assignment, it's really helpful to set yourself an assignment in an area or a place or in a subject with a subject that you can get back to and try again with that same subject and different qualities of light, different mindset, perhaps even different mood. So the idea of being able to get back to that same place became really important. And there were several subjects where I thought there was a photograph in this particular thing, this particular subject. One that I have in my head is a little section of tree bark that I thought there might be a photograph there, and I photographed it several different times, and it worked a couple of times in a sort of halfway kind of way, but it wasn't really the photograph that I was expecting. And what was interesting is that it wasn't until I discovered that it was a photograph that was best made in diffuse light that was not direct. So waiting until a time of day so that the light was not actually shining right on this section of tree, and helping me to see that the subtlety of the values in that picture was more important than the shadows that I had thought were important to begin with. So that self-assignment, forcing yourself, thinking about what it was that you wanted to see, and then making yourself return to that subject over and over again to see what you can find. And I suppose you could apply this just in one day or 1 hour even, or 20 minutes, stake out a particular area and decide that this is the space you want to be in, and what can you see to photograph there. So I'll put a few of these pictures up on Camera Position, a Camera Position blog, and again in the PDF that goes along with the Camera Position app, and we'll see what we can see. And I'd be interested in hearing what your self-assignments are, what it is that you make yourself do photographically. So thanks for joining me, and I'll see you on the next episode of Camera Position, the podcast about the creative side of photography.